So can you legally buy properties in your self-directed IRA or individual retirement account that you plan to lease out as short-term rentals on Airbnb? And if so, what's the best way to structure it? The answer to this question is no, you cannot. Just kidding. Of course you can. I'm doing a whole freaking video on the topic. Hey, I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals, and before we get into this topic, if you want more information on what a self-directed IRA is or how you can get one set up for yourself, you can check out this video that I recently did by clicking on the little interactive link that just popped up. And basically in that video, what I explain is how they work, how these self-directed IRAs work, the rules that you really need to be conscious of if you're gonna set one up for yourself. So I highly recommend checking that out first. Essentially, however, what a self-directed IRA does is allows you to invest your retirement account, your retirement funds, in anything that you want, essentially, with a few exceptions. So why would anyone want to do this, and why is it so powerful? Well, a lot of people over the years, they've invested mostly automatically in these retirement accounts, whether it's an old 401k from work or it's an IRA. Every paycheck, they've just been continuously putting money into it, and they've been investing that money into most likely mutual funds or stocks. And it's grown over time. So over here in this retirement account, they've got a whole bunch of cash, a pile of cash. And then outside of the retirement account, there's not usually a whole lot of cash to invest in real estate. So when they learn about the power, the money-making power of building a really strong rental portfolio, they think, man, there's all this money that I'd love to dig into so that I can invest it into rental properties, especially short-term rentals. So the IRS allows you to tap into those retirement funds and invest them into properties simply by self-directing your IRA. So how does this principle apply to short-term rentals or Airbnb type properties? And why is there this question of legality when it comes to short-term rentals in your IRA? Well, there's two main rules, I guess, around your self-directed IRA. There's lots of rules, but there's two big ones. Number one is that you can't work in the investment that's in your IRA. So you can't do active work on it to prop up the value of that investment. And number two is that it can't benefit you personally until retirement. And it also can't benefit your kids or your parents, so any of your direct lineage. So you can absolutely buy a short-term rental within your IRA. The IRS just says you can buy properties in a self-directed IRA. They don't dictate and say, oh, you can't buy a long-term or a short-term or commercial. They just allow you to buy investment properties in your self-directed IRA. But the same rules apply whether it's a long-term rental or a short-term rental. So you can't benefit from it personally. So you can't buy a Airbnb on the beach and go stay at it yourself. Also, you can't rent it to your kids or let your kids stay there, which is actually a really positive thing. I mean, if you think about it, they can't come home on spring break and say, Dad, I'm gonna go use the beach house. You can just say, I'm sorry, Uncle Sam doesn't allow you to. So it's never gonna come up as a problem. Also, the thing to keep in mind is that the funds that are purchasing that property need to come from your IRA directly. So when you purchase it, those are IRA funds that are buying it. And then when you're renting it out, all the funds from the rent need to go back directly into your IRA. There cannot be any flow of funds to you as an individual. You can't benefit from this property until retirement when you start withdrawing those funds from your IRA. So then the question comes up, what's the best way to set this up so it's easy to manage? Because it can sound a little complicated, like I'm gonna have to go back and forth with my IRA custodian a lot because there's gonna be the purchase and then the rent back and forth and expenses and stuff. So there is an easier way to set this up so that it's a lot less management intensive, but it gets a little meta here, so stick with me. So the best way to set this up is to set up an LLC inside your IRA. So you personally, you own an IRA. The IRA owns an LLC, and the LLC owns the property. So now instead of just having an IRA with a custodian that you need to go to direct funds every time you want to make a transaction, you own an LLC inside the IRA that owns the property. So in that LLC, you can make all the decisions. It's much easier. You have checkbook control. So the LLC will have its own bank account that's funded by the IRA, and you buy the property with that LLCs, or multiple properties with that LLC, so that on the title as the owner of that property, it's your LLC, and you can direct those funds however you want then. So you don't have to go back to your custodian constantly to direct new funds. Also, the other benefit of this is that it's much easier to get a loan or to refinance a property in an LLC as opposed to in a self-directed retirement account. The leverage is higher. It's just a much more common practice. The interest rate is typically lower. So I would recommend setting up this LLC inside your IRA, and that's what's going to own the property, and it's pretty simple to do. So why then does the question come up around the legality of short-term rentals in your IRA versus owning something else like a long-term rental? Well, I think most people think of short-term rentals as much more hands-on than long-term rentals, and they certainly can be. And one way to prevent yourself from ever getting in trouble or being accused of doing work on your property is just to have a property manager who manages the short-term rentals that are owned in your IRA. And they're basically going to do everything for you. You're never gonna have to work on that property for the most part. However, it is legal to manage the property yourself as long as you're taking certain measures or certain precautions. So you can't show up to that property and physically do the work on that property yourself. You still need to have a maintenance person who, if between guests there's something that breaks, they go over there, they fix it. Also, I would advise having a cleaning crew that's separate. It's probably not the best use of your time to go and clean that property. It's probably a better use of your time to buy more of these in your IRA and start accumulating more assets. So all the physical hands-on stuff that happens at the property, you still want to make sure that's outsourced to someone else. But you're definitely allowed to rent out your own property that's owned in your IRA. So you can lease out a long-term rental and you can lease out a short-term rental. So you can list it on Airbnb yourself and you can respond to the guest inquiries. So everything else is essentially the same when it comes to running an Airbnb inside an IRA or outside an IRA. You just need to be aware of the rules of owning a self-directed IRA. So if you want more information about short-term rentals in general and how they work, you can check out this video by clicking again on the little interactive link that just popped up. Finally, I'd love to hear what your questions are around this topic so I can help get you answers. You have two options for this. You can join me next Wednesday, April 28th at 3 p.m. in the Living Off Rentals Facebook group. I'm gonna do a Facebook Live. So if you're not a member of that group, join the group. You can join me on that Facebook Live session. My plan is to try to get somebody from my IRA custodial company, Midland IRA, to join me on that Facebook Live and answer any questions you have about setting up a self-directed IRA, setting up an LLC inside your self-directed IRA, questions about investing in short-term or long-term rentals. So they don't know it yet, but that's my plan, is to get them on that Facebook Live, and so we'll make it happen. The second way, if it's after April 28th, then obviously it's probably too late to join that live. You can still join the group and watch the replay, or you can just type your question below and I'll get you an answer to that question. But if you're a troll and you comment about Viagra or Bitcoin or Russian women, I'm going to report you to the Facebook police, and shame on you. Hey, I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals, and just to start off, just to not start off like a freaking idiot. Hey, I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals. Good golly, Miss Molly. Take 27. Hey, I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals. Thanks for joining me for this video. I hope to see you over in the Facebook group, but if not, I'll see you in the next video.